we're here because Mrs. Tuttle and Mrs. Hawk, the Bader sisters, has spent a good portion of their family's funds supporting Children's Hospital. And from what I can read, they have always wanted to do things to give children access from St. Louis to the best that medical care could provide them. Mrs. Hawk was the baby in 1926 who came here for 5 days and somehow had a life-threatening stomach ailment and survived, to the eternal gratitude of her sister, Mrs. Tuttle, and the rest of her family. Try as we might, we couldn't find the medical record enough to know exactly what happened. And when this happened in 1927, it's quite possible that my great uncle, my pediatrician, who was a house officer at Children's Hospital at that time, took care of her. Given that it was a stomach ailment, and it was life-threatening, what could they have done that would have been so different? It's quite likely if she had a stomach ailment, she was dehydrated. And if she'd been dehydrated at St. Louis Children's Hospital in the late 20s, she would have offered Hartman's solution. The first IV fluid with sugar and electrolytes that was designed by the first department chairman here, Alexis Hartman Sr., to treat diabetic ketoacidosis, which now is known as lactated rigors, the standardized IV solution around the world. It wouldn't surprise me at all that at that time in 1926, the availability of fluid you could give, not IV, but probably in the muscle, may have prevented the dehydration from claiming Mrs. Hawk's life as an infant and allowed her to become an adult. So so what would we tell if they were here? What could we show them? Because they wanted to support Children's Hospital so that other children had the same benefits that Mrs. Hawk did. And what I could do if they were here to show them would not talk about numbers and graphs, but to show them. And if I could, I would show them Stephanie Teal, which was going to be here but couldn't, who was the third infant heart transplant we did here in June of 1990. Stephanie, in January of this year, delivered a healthy term newborn infant with no heart disease on the same heart that was put in her in 1990. The heart worked so well that she delivered in her home hospital in Decatur, because in reality, she wasn't a high-risk pregnancy. I would tell them about Gabriel Weil, who 9 years ago came here with his muscular dystrophy, but it wasn't that was the problem. He had a heart that was so electrically malfunctioning that he was on a ventilator. And he was the first child or teenager that we used a biventricular pacer on. 9 years later, he's finishing up his college degree. And for sure, the muscular dystrophy that we thought he had, he may not have had. And we don't know what his future is, but he knows he's going to go finish his degree and he's moving forward. And finally, I want to show them Caitlin Cuba, who was the first child that we ever used vasodilator therapy on in this hospital, because as she was biting her medulloblastoma, she was given an experimental anthracycline that led to awful heart failure. We treated her with the vasodilators at the time. She stabilized and got better. And over the last 25 years, she has been the benefit of all the advances in the adult world for all the medications which she is on. And now in her 30s, she is a long-term survivor of not just a medulloblastoma, but of what at the time was life-threatening heart failure. And the interesting thing is, to compare even with the best of it, her heart now works better than it did 20 years ago. That's not supposed to happen if you have cardiotoxicity from chemotherapy, but it didn't hurt, but it's allowed her us to question established truths. So when you say, what's the impact of adult breakthroughs in pediatric heart disease? It's led to those patients becoming the patients of the adult doctors who made the breakthroughs. The breakthroughs they designed for their patients who are middle-aged and elderly to give them 5, 10 years maybe, in pediatric patients have given them not just 10 years, but 15, 20, 25 years. And it's going. I think the expectations of those doctors is profound. And my advice to them is when they ask me, what should you do for these patients? Or how would you handle these? I would say simply, they just give them the best. That their confidence in you at times will be greater than the confidence you have in yourself. But I think if you let yourself be led by their determination and their courage, they may be quite surprised at what they can accomplish. I think I've been honored today, but over the years it's been my honor to be the vehicle for their determination and courage. Thank you very much.